Welcome back, everybody. In this week's video, I'm going to be going over 8 centering tips that I wish I knew when I started wheel throwing. So if that's something that you want to see, stick around and find out what they are. Before we start this week's video, I want to say mahalo to all of the Mud Club members and a shout out to the Mud Club Plus members. We have Sister Bragdon and Pamela K. Jameson. If you folks would like to join and become part of our membership, the link is in the description below. And as a member, you not only get to support this channel, but you can unlock additional perks if you go up to the next tier. So hopefully I get to see you folks as members in the next week's video. But until then, let's get started with what we have for today. So when it comes to centering your piece on the pottery wheel, that is the most difficult and frustrating part about learning pottery. I myself was horrible at it. It took me 2 months of wheel throwing every day in high school to learn how to do it myself. It was so bad that I would have my pottery teacher center it for me. And the only reason why I was able to learn on my own is because after 2 months, he cut me off and he said, "Hey, you got to learn this yourself." And so I figured it out with his help. And now I'm actually teaching you guys things that I wish I knew when I started. So, to kick everything off, tip number 1, always try to brace yourself against something, whether that's the splash pan, whether that is your legs, whether that is your hands against hands. Always brace yourself against something for more stability. Whenever you have floating arms, odds are those arms are not the most stable, and that unevenness, unstableness will transfer to your piece, making it that much more difficult to center. So whenever I center, because this wheel is higher up than normal, I usually have my arms braced up against the splash pan. Now, in most normal wheels, you probably would have your arms braced up against your legs like this, and you would be leaning in and leaning out, always keeping your hands braced against your legs. So whenever you can, elbows or arms on your legs or on the splash pan when you're throwing. That's one of the biggest things that I have to remind my students as they're beginning, because oftentimes it's natural for your arms to lift up. All right, tip number 2 is I don't recommend you throw the clay on, because odds are if you throw it and you miss, you're going to have a much harder time centering a piece that's already off-center to begin with. So instead of throwing it, I recommend you gently place it and you push down. And that looks something like this. So you take your clay and get back into a ball. And the first thing that I recommend is you put it on the wheel. You start rolling it around like a joystick to create a center point. That center point you then place directly on the center of your wheel or your bat, and then you start pushing down on the clay. Then you rotate, then you push down, then you rotate, then you push down, and you keep repeating. And as you get comfortable with this, you can push down and then rotate all in one motion. Lift up, push down, rotate, and you just go around in a circle. And if you can place it and manually push it down without the wheel spinning, your piece is already going to be that much closer to center than if you throw it and you miss. All right? But let's say you push it and you're pushing it and it's off center already like this. If you see my thumb's not moving, but the clay's hitting it, meaning it's off center. So if that happens, then instead of trying to just manually push it into center as the wheel's spinning, stop the wheel, find where it's off center, and gently nudge it into center. So when it spins, where it's off center, that's where my thumb is, gently nudge it into center and start pushing down again. So there we go. It's centered again. And let's go ahead and seal the edge. And then let's jump into the next tips about centering. All right, once your piece is blended into the clay and you're ready to start adding water and getting lubricated, the next tip number 3, is try not to put too much water too fast. In general, water makes your clay weaker, and if you add too much water, it can actually cause cracking issues when it's drying. And you don't want to touch the clay when it's not spinning. So when it's not spinning, you don't want to put your hands on and then spin, because as you start throwing and digging your well and all that stuff, that will actually make it harder for your piece to stay centered, because odds are when you put pressure on, it will get thrown off center. All right, so anyway, so let's go ahead and spin, add a little bit of water, and now we are ready to then get this pushed down. So that leads to tip number 4. Whenever you apply pressure, it's easy on pressure, and then when you want to release, easy off. The reason why you don't want to apply pressure all at once and release suddenly is usually you get a piece that's really off center because you force it into one shape and you release suddenly and the clay can't really adapt to what you're doing. So instead, you lean your body weight forward, then you keep your hands there, and then once you're ready to release the pressure, you lean back and then you release your hands. So whenever you apply pressure, easy on, lean forward. When you want to release pressure, lean back, easy off. That is a great habit to get into, not only for centering, but for all wheel throwing in general. Next tip is wheel speed. And this kind of goes into all throwing in general. Ideally, you want your wheel spinning no faster than medium speed, which is right here. If you go quarter speed, it's harder for you to center because your hands have to be that much more stable. And you never want to go full speed because your clay is just really going to get out of control with the amount of pressure you add. So medium speed is your friend. Try to stay within medium speed when you are centering. All right, the clay is pushed down, and now we are ready to start coning up and down to get this perfectly centered. So that leads into tip number 5, and that is no volcanoes and no mushrooms. So what does that mean? So when you cone up, you may have experienced that you create a divot in the center when you squeeze the sides. And so that right there is making a volcano. And that's something we don't want, because when we start pushing the clay down, what normally happens is we trap water or air in there, and then that can cause issues moving forward. So I'm going to get this a little taller. And now you must be wondering, what do you mean by mushrooms? So if you take your clay and you just push straight down, what's going to happen is you're going to get a really wobbly, really funky looking mushroom top that's developing. And so whenever you cone down, if you push straight down, that will always develop. And so when I mean no mushrooms and no volcanoes, that means you have to set your clay up and apply the pressure in the correct spots to prevent that from happening. So volcanoes or divots, the reason why it happens, if you have a flat top, a plateau when you cone up, every single time you're going to start squeezing the exterior of the clay to make it rise. The sides will always rise faster than the middle, causing the middle to sink down and the sides to go up, creating this divot. So in order to not have that divot, you're going to have to make sure that your tip, your middle, is always pointy. So to get rid of the divot once it's formed, easiest way to do it, you take your left or your right hand, put your thumb down to create this little notch, and then you can either do one hand at a time. The notch goes over the clay. Left hand would be at 9 and you push down, or right hand at 3 and you push down, or both hands together and you push down. And then if the tip is not fully pointy, it's still a little divoted, then you can take your sponge, apply light pressure to the side of the tip, and then slowly bring it down the clay to then transfer the clay from the middle down the sides. So now we have it back to a point. So when we cone up, you're pushing the clay away from you at 7 o'clock, and you're pulling the clay towards you at 2 o'clock. And if you have a point when you cone up, you should keep that point when you get to your final stopping point. And if you have a point when you cone up, you should be able to maintain that as you finish the final movement. So now for the cone down. The reason why you create a mushroom when you cone down is you're applying downwards pressure, straight down. And when the clay is being applied with downwards pressure, it's expanding in every single direction, causing it to become not only off-center, but create that mushroom. And if you don't apply external force from the side to push that mushroom in, it's just going to grow bigger and bigger. So the best way to prevent the mushroom from forming, always push the clay diagonally forward so it bends like a banana. So to see that in action, I'm actually going to bring this clay really high up So I guess you can call this tip 5B. We don't want mushrooms, we want bananas. So I'm not gonna shift here. So now this is my midnight. And if I take this clay, I take my thumb, that same way I push that divot away, I push my thumb between my pointer finger and middle finger, this little notch here, I then put over the top. If I push and lean the clay forward, it creates a banana. And if I keep pushing slowly, it actually started cracking there. I pushed too hard. But if you keep pushing slowly, you can actually center the clay with one hand. Granted, you're driving the clay forward rather than straight down. So if I do it normally for the cone down, this cone up, we're going to do the karate chop where this one pushes forward. So you interlock your pinky and your thumb, brace your hands around the clay, your left hand, and then you lean your way forward so the clay tilts forward. Same concept, you're pushing forward, and then your fingers right here are squeezing at the base. Now odds are your piece is still going to be slightly off-centered, so you would just keep going up and down until it's centered. But one thing to remember, when you cone up and down, the more you do it, more likely this little thing right here, this ramp, this skirt will appear. So tip number 6 is always remove the skirt when possible. So to do that, you take your sponge, wrap it around your pointer finger in your right hand, apply downwards pressure at 3 o'clock, and then slide your hand inward towards the middle to create a nice 90-degree angle. The reason why you don't want the skirt is because that ramp will act as a half pipe. So when you try to push, it will ride the skirt up like this. It will push and it'll ride the skirt up, and odds are you're going to push higher up than the very bottom. But if you have a wall and you push, you can't go up because there's nothing to then lift or slide against. So always remove the skirt when you're coning up or coning down. All right, tip number 7. Leverage is your friend. So if I were to have this off center and I am just getting frustrated, every time I cone up and down, it's not getting close, use leverage as your friend. Leverage meaning get your arms tucked into your body and lean forward and use your body weight to center this. So from the main camera, this is the side view of what it looks like when you're throwing. Odds are when you are trying to center, you're hunched over, and if you're trying to apply more pressure and really center it, you're leaning forward, but it's mostly you're bending at your back. You're not actually pushing forward. And so what happens if you look at the main camera, as you're leaning your body forward, you're bending forward, but your hands are not moving anymore that direction. So instead, what you should do is you get your elbow, lock it into your hip bone like that. It's a little awkward, but you're kind of tilted. And then if you lean forward now, you can see my hand goes from the splash pan much further towards the wheel head. So when I'm really up close to the pottery wheel, legs sucked up against the sides of the splash pan, elbow on my leg. Now when I put it to my hip bone and I'm leaning forward, you can see that my arm is actually moving much further forward. Rather than if I'm just leaning forward, my arm is staying stationary and only my body is moving. So whenever you're using leverage, try your best to lean your whole body forward and keep your elbow locked into your hip bone. So let's get some clay on here to show you what it looks like. So I got my clay. I'm going to go ahead and purposely push it off center like that. And then now when I try to center, if I'm just leaning forward and I'm just trying to push down on it, it might get a little centered, but it's still going to be wobbly. But if I can use leverage by locking my elbow into my hip bone, laying my hand down, and I'm just leaning my body weight forward and my weight transfers to my hand, you can center this without even using your right hand. So off center, lean your body weight forward, pushing this direction, let the rotation of the wheel help you out. Now with two hands, you do the karate chop. This just pushes down to make sure it doesn't rise up, and this just pushes forward. So lean your body weight forward, lean back, and then you got a centered piece. So leverage is your friend. Use your body weight to your advantage because you are heavier than the clay. But if you don't use your elbow, you don't lock it into your body, you don't brace it up against something, you don't lean your body weight into it, the clay will always win. All right, and tip number 8, probably the biggest tip for everyone trying to learn how to center. There is no right or wrong way when it comes to centering techniques. As long as it works for you and you can get it centered, then do it. If a centering technique that you learned or seen is not working for you, try a different technique. Some may work better than others, and as you learn what works best for you, you can adapt it and alter it based on your throwing preferences. And that also leads into my next part, is centering is the most difficult of wheel throwing. It will be frustrating. Some days you won't be able to center. Some days you can center really quickly. The main takeaway is just make sure that you don't get discouraged, because once you can get things centered, everything kind of clicks from there. And centering is the most important part about wheel throwing. It sets you up for success. If your piece is wobbly and you try to dig your well and start throwing something, your piece is going to turn out wobbly and off center, and you probably won't feel very happy about it. But if you can take the time, learn the process, understand what's working and what's not, and you can get a centered piece to then throw, you're going to have a lot more success, and you're going to be able to improve your throwing abilities much faster if you can start with a nice centered piece. So I hope you learned something new from these 8 centering tips that I wish I knew when I started, because like I said, I was horrible at centering. And if you have any tips about wheel throwing, about centering, please let me know in the comments below. I love to get these tips and compile them into videos and also teach my students, because some of these tips may not be for everybody. But other than that, as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.